Happy Halloween, everyone. So, first of all, this video is not going to go quite according to the plan that I had originally laid out for it. I had some stuff that happened last week that I'm going to talk about next week. But for now, it is Halloween, and I did say I'd do something, so here we are, and we're gonna do it. Some stuff. So, I watched a bunch of Halloween movies. And I've been watching them slowly over the past several years because I was trying to work up to doing more Halloween-y things. But I also rewatched them again this year, so here's my, I guess, top 5 Halloween movies so far. So I watched The Worst Witch, which is a Tim Curry movie because, you know, he's in about a third of it. And the movie pretty much falls apart the minute he gets on camera because it's Tim Curry and the movie stops for Tim Curry. Like, all semblance of structure just goes out the window as soon as that man gets on screen. Those of us who spend a good deal of time on the internet have probably seen the song. I'll link in the description, and, well, have at it. This was a recommendation of my significant other to watch this movie because it is everything. Apparently there's a series of books and everything, and there's like a whole kerfuffle over whether J.K. Rowling stole the IP and the idea for Harry Potter from this series. It's like a thing. I was not familiar with it. Not totally sure how I feel about that theory, but there it is. So this movie is it's worth a watch. It's worth a watch. It's a little cheesy. It's, you know, it's clearly made for kids. It's got that very British thing of like a $5 budget with 3 props and 2 costumes for the same actor. But I kind of find that charming as an old theater kid myself, you know, and definitely worth a watch. Of course, we also watched Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, and Tim Burton gets the credit for this, even though it is his characters and it is his plot and all that. It's not really his movie in the sense that he didn't direct it and that sort of thing. It's kind of a weird thing. To me, this is a Danny Elfman movie, because he does all of the singing voice for Jack. He does all of the music for the entire movie. It's kind of crazy. It's basically an opera written for claymation. And I kind of wonder, in a production sense, how that was done. I think they must have written the music first, because they animate everything to that tempo, to that speech and all that. So they must have had the music ready to go so they could do it properly with the voice actors, unless they just made the voice actors do what the claymation is doing and make that fit the other way. I kind of wonder. And I've never really looked in the special features of this movie, so please leave me a comment, let me know. I'm very curious about these kinds of things. Now, I'm going to read what I wrote after watching Nightmare again this year for the probably millionth time. And this is one of those movies that was always put on in school when we like couldn't go outside for recess and stuff, so we'd only ever get through the first like third of the movie, just time-wise. And it's like, there's a couple of movies like that. There's like, you know, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and things like that, where movies where you just saw the first like third of it 1,000 times as a kid, because that was what we had in, you know, for not recess. So I noticed something about Sally's dress. Sally demonstrates considerable skill as a seamstress when she makes Jack's Sandy Claus outfit, but her own dress is just sort of thrown together. Like Sally herself, it's a patchwork, more of a proof of concept than something born out of love. Dr. Finkelstein did not create Sally as a labor of love. He did it to prove that he could, to feed his own narcissism. Sally is the antithesis of this. She goes out of her way to prepare a care package for Jack and then immediately throws herself out a window to deliver it to him. She doesn't care what happens to her and only puts herself back together so she can do something kind for Jack. And we see this pattern of her loving others more than she loves herself repeatedly throughout the film. Even Santa picks up on this. He calls her the only one in Halloween Town who makes any sense. She seems to be the only one who has empathy, a quality Santa would naturally be able to identify and appreciate. But here's the thing. Jack and Sally's relationship is not healthy. It's kind of shoehorned into this movie. It's kind of weird, actually, because we don't really see any build-up there. We see her pining for him, and we see him notice her, and that's about it. And then by the end of it, they're like, oh, well, we're obviously meant to be. Why? There's not really a relationship there. It's kind of weird. It's kind of a parasocial relationship because Jack is such a big figure in this town, and then there's Sally just coming along like, oh, hi, Jack. Like, I don't even get why he even really notices her, because compared to everybody else in the town and how much they adore him, I don't even see how it would register. He calls her his closest friend. When did that happen? She just snuck up to your window and then slept outside your fence overnight. Like, that's the only real interaction we see. So I can't really say that this relationship is founded on, like, mutual interest and healthy foundations. So I also watched Hocus Pocus, which I had never seen until a few years ago. And oh my goodness. Okay, so the first time I watched this movie, I was like, okay, I get it. It's a fun kids movie, whatever. But it's one of those movies that really, over time, as you continue to rewatch it, becomes amazing. It's so over the top. It's so ridiculous. I love it. And it's absolutely worth a watch. The Sanderson sisters, who are absolutely the focus of this movie, despite our main characters not being them, they just, if they were any other people than who they are, and if they didn't take this performance as seriously as they did, this movie would never work. And of course, a lot of movies where the villains aren't compelling aren't going to work, but you actually end up caring way more about those characters than you do about the people who are on screen the entire time, because, like, Max is the main character of the movie, but he's kind of not an interesting character. The Sanderson sisters, on the other hand, are just on screen. Every minute they're on screen is amazing. It's just gold the whole time. And it's campy and it's ridiculous, but oh my god, it's so much fun. So I also watched It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Now this is something that I had seen 100 times in my childhood, and it still holds up. You know, there's something kind of magical about Peanuts. They just work. And I think part of that is the fact that it's very adult themes and content being spoken through the voice and character of children. And when you're a child, you do feel like you have an adult sense of the world, and you just don't. And I think there's something really charming in that translates really well to both audiences. So another movie that I didn't really see until the last few years was Beetlejuice. And I don't know why that was, but for some reason it just wasn't a thing in my life. And I gotta say, it is a fun movie, it is a wild movie, it is not my favorite movie. I think it's interesting and it plays with those kinds of dark themes and things like that, but for some reason, to me, it's just not a great movie. It's not one that I want to watch a million times. It doesn't have the same charm of something like Hocus Pocus or, you know, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. It just, for me, there's not a lot of rewatch value, and I think for most people that's because they grew up on it and saw it 100,000 times, the same way I feel about these other movies, and why I can keep coming back to them and watching them and see new things every time I watch them. But something like this, where it's like, you really had to grow up with it, this one, for me, just didn't really stick. And I don't know, maybe that's a personal preference thing, but it's on the list, and it is a movie that I now consistently watch at Halloween, so there it is. So that's my thoughts on some movies. Of course, I watched other Halloween episodes of my favorite shows and everything. Of course, there's a bunch of really scary SpongeBob episodes, but there's really only one Halloween episode. I may or may not have seasons 1 through 5 on a media server in my house. So of course, I also carved some pumpkins. Or I should say I carved one pumpkin, my partner carved another one, and I'll put up a photo and let you guess which of us is an artist. Yeah. Well, I knew I couldn't compete with what that artist was going to create, so I decided to go with cute and derpy. And I think, actually I really like mine. I also went to a local event called Rise of the Jack-O-Lanterns. Now, what this is this walkway on this beautiful garden estate place in Old Westbury, and that's a place local to me. But basically the idea is that there are 5,000 carved pumpkins. There's giant jack-o'-lantern sculpture type things, all kinds of really crazy stuff. I'll put a link in the description. They have a cool video about it. And it's different pretty much every time you go, because obviously if you put out 5,000 pumpkins, they're gonna get nasty and they have to cycle through them. So every time you go, if you go a few weeks apart, you'll see different exhibits and pumpkins and things. And I don't have footage from this sort of thing because I find that in low lighting, this camera in particular is terrible, and really the only thing that works is my phone, and by the time I'm taking photos and all this, it's like, am I really enjoying the event? But there's always some cool ones, you know? They had some interesting new ones this year where they do like singing jack-o'-lanterns. It's like projected onto a pumpkin, and it's actually pretty clever how they do it, but you know, it's singing jack-o'-lanterns, which kind of puts mine to shame. But you know, there's also all the cute little derpy ones like mine. There's all the artistic ones like my partner's. There's all kinds of inspiration to be had there. And it was cold when we went. It was just about freezing. We had a freeze warning, but I don't think it got too freezing by the time we were there. I ended up wearing something like 4 layers of clothing. It was like pajamas and like jeans and then like sweatshirts on top of shirts and then like a jacket on top of that, and just, it was a little crazy. But you know, because you're walking around outside, it's good stuff, you know. And I like going after dark because that's when you really see the show. And yeah, I highly recommend doing stuff like this. You know, for me, as someone who didn't really get to celebrate holidays in a happy way growing up, reclaiming them as an adult and being free to do different things that you wouldn't have done at that time, and seeing kids especially be really excited about it, you know, it's been really great. And I don't know, personally, I love that my neighborhood gets trick-or-treaters still. I think that is the coolest thing ever. Kids love candy, and you're going to be their supplier, and we've kind of developed a reputation at my house for being the house with all the allergy-free candy but gives out a lot. So, and you know, to darken things a little bit, I am a little jealous of those kids because they're getting to do the things that I never could, and they're enjoying it, and they're living their lives and having fun. But you know what? As an adult, it's my choice whether or not I can do the same thing, and I'm going to go out of my way to try to do as much as I can to enjoy this, because I have that choice, and I can be miserable, I can brood, and I did for a long time, and for me it's just not been worth it. I would much rather be a dork and be here in my Halloween pumpkin jack-o'-lantern shirt talking about my favorite dorky kids movies for Halloween than sitting around being upset that I missed out on things. Because now I'm an adult, and I decide what things I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna make the most of it. And I don't know if this is helpful. I know that this video was kind of slapped together and not exactly what I had in mind when I was planning this out, but I think, considering the circumstances that I'll be explaining in more detail next week, it's going to make much more sense why it's such a mess, and I like to think I brought some charm into it. I brought some friends into the room. So that is all for this video. Next month we have Thanksgiving coming up, and I am absolutely going to do a feature on that, and I'm going to make it as fun as I possibly can. Might even include some video of me going shopping for a bunch of vegetarian/vegan options for Thanksgiving dinner. That could be exciting. I'm going to plan that one a lot better and start filming a lot farther in advance because it's Tuesday night. So that's all for this week. I hope you all are having a happy, safe, and fun Halloween, and I will be back again next week with another video that I hope you will find interesting. Until then, stay curious, and don't forget to brush your teeth after you eat all that candy. Also, pro tip, all the Halloween candy goes on sale after Wednesday.